Welcome to On the Bench. I'm your host. I got cross-eyed there. I'm your host for this episode, Brendan Sinone, joined by Zach Blostein, Chris Nee. Gents, happy Thursday, happy bye week, and happy flip season, I guess. It's not that happy, though.
It's not very happy flip season. I think the flips are going to work out in a negative direction overall for FSU versus a positive direction.
Well, today doesn't feel like the one to be upset about, but we'll get into it here. So before we go any further, a shout out to our sponsors, Chattanooga Whiskey, helping us get through this dreadful season. Maybe if you have some fun hires or some quarterback commits, anything like that in the next few days, weeks, whenever, there'll be a reason to celebrate and use the Chattanooga Whiskey in that regard rather than drowning sorrows. But whatever the reason that you're uncorking a bottle of Chattanooga Whiskey, it's well deserved to have on your bar cart, and an exquisite drink, an exquisite company that does a phenomenal job with craft distilling. Their 111 proof is one of the best value bottles, maybe the best value on the bourbon market out there. I'm well attest to drinking many of their bottles. Yeah, I have a lot in my collection, as you can see behind me.
Bottles, not drinks. He drinks bottles.
What did I say?
You said bottles.
I do drink bottles.
I know. Intervention time, buddy.
At the bottle. Oh, and then if we want to play Buyer Sinone, which maybe we will in a little bit, it's sponsored by
the Turner Group.
The Turner Group. Colin and Amy Turner are killing it in I was going to say the craft distillery game. I'm getting my reads mixed up, but they're killing it in the house buying and selling game. Sorry, Colin. Seriously, though, if you're in Central Florida or really throughout the state of Florida and you're going to be in the market, you're thinking about it, Colin is where we would direct you to go. He is well connected, works extremely hard, just an affable, nice, good, genuine human being who's been so bummed out for this season. So make him happy, buy a house. All right, Zach, let's get into this here. It is flip season. This was not a surprise. Hell, this is something that was talked about in the summer. FSU was able to withstand a push back then, but fast forward to 1-9, and it opened up the door for this. FSU lost their quarterback commit, Tramell Jones. He hasn't flipped anywhere yet, but we expect to flip pretty soon. Let's get into it.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I think has been in the works for a long time. If you remember back in the spring and in the summer, he took a number of visits that were reported to Florida. I was told at the time that he took multiple that were under, off the radar of, maybe recruiting reporters. And, he was taking kind of some secret trips over to UF. And at that time, I thought that was a clear indication that that's where his recruitment was trending. I thought he was going to flip to Florida. And, I kind of voiced that on our message boards ahead of his June official visit to Florida State, which I viewed as kind of like that window, whether FSU would figure out if they're going to roll with him or if he's going to flip. And I thought at the time that, FSU should probably just move forward with heavily recruiting other quarterback options. And they were behind the scenes. Like, they were talking to a few, including, someone we'll talk about in a bit. But yeah, I mean, I thought that relationship and that level of trust with your quarterback commit was kind of tarnished back in the spring and summer months. And I was told basically this season, in back and forth between Florida State and Tramell and his camp, basically, just asking whether he was still entertaining interest from Florida. That happened to be the case. So Florida State did move forward with putting an all-out effort in recruiting Carter Smith. He's a 4-star quarterback out of Bishop Faro High School. And, someone that we'll talk more in depth about. But yeah, with Tramell, I thought I thought the writing was on the wall for a long time. Maybe if Florida State puts together a solid season, he sticks. But I just felt like the trust there was kind of broken when when we had learned that he was taking those under the radar trips to Gainesville. And it kind of, I think it's honestly like a good thing for Florida State because, they were going to probably invest decently well into the NIL game with Tramell. And, for what the current position of the program, they need help right now. And I don't know that putting money towards a player that you don't expect to play for you for, multiple years, a solid chunk of money into that player is a great idea. So, I don't think Trammell flipping away or decommitting so far from FSU is necessarily a bad thing. That's my take. I think you agree with that, Brendan. Chris, what's your takeaway from this situation?
To be perfectly honest on Trammell, even when he was committed, back when he did commit, I've always liked him. I don't love him. I'm kind of indifferent as long as they make sure to get a high school quarterback who's of a certain caliber in this class. I think the trade is equal or better.
Yeah. I think Brennan's muted.
Damn it. Great start here. Yeah, I agree. That's all. Happy that I derailed everything just to say I agreed with a take that I already had earlier in the week.
Yep. So let's get into Carter Smith. He's FSU's top option at quarterback moving forward. He's a former Michigan commit. Like I said, he is a 4-star composite quarterback out of Bishop Barrett High School in Fort Myers. He's the number 158 overall player on the 24/7 Sports composite and the number 14th ranked quarterback. Soon after the Trammell Jones news broke that he had decommitted from FSU, I put up an article, basically outlining what's next for Florida State at quarterback. I said, I think that Carter Smith's that next top option, and we've kind of already been reporting that. I talked to Carter, I believe, last week just about what his plans were going to be. I threw in a crystal ball pick for FSU to eventually land Carter Smith. I think that's where this one's trending. We've confirmed that he's going to take an official visit to FSU for the final home game of the season against Florida. I think it's likely he also takes a trip to Florida State the weekend prior, surrounding that Charleston Southern game, an unofficial visit. So, yeah, I mean, he's going to Wisconsin this weekend. That's really the main school FSU's battling down the stretch for Carter Smith. I don't view them as a super challenging contender in this recruitment to FSU. I think Florida State will win out, but that is something to monitor. His official visit to Wisconsin this weekend for their game against Oregon, I believe, is who they play.
To fill in some of the blanks on Carter Smith, decommitted from Michigan back on October 30th of this year. He originally committed to Michigan in November of 2023. Him and FSU isn't some new, FSU scrambling type thing. They've had involvement with one another heavily dating back to 2022. He actually camped at FSU twice in the summer of 2022, once in June, once in July. He was back in October of 2023. On October 7th for a game. Actually spoke to him the next morning on October 8th after he had come in and spent some time with the staff. I remember that October conversation. It was a little bit weird. I believe Trammell at that point either had committed or was on the verge of committing. What was that looking for, boys?
Like lagged out for a second or something.
I had pulled up Carter Smith's stats on Max Preps and the video popped up and it started singing and making noise. I didn't know if it picked up.
So speaking on the October visit to FSU, it was sort of like FSU didn't want to be rude to Trammell Jones and also didn't want to be rude to Carter Smith. They weren't going to. Basically, Carter Smith, I don't think, ever went and sat in Mike Norvell's office on that visit because of the relationship FSU had at the time with Trammell Jones. Now, the nice thing was I remember talking to Carter, and he understood that. He was mature in the moment of understanding what was going on there. But FSU has liked Carter Smith for 2 years. This isn't some Johnny-come-lately type of situation. Tony Tokars especially, I believe, likes Carter Smith quite a bit. Carter Smith's got a major baseball background. Brett somewhere listening to this, fist pumping in the air, wishing he would play FSU baseball, I'm sure, if he does end up in Tallahassee. But he's decided to concentrate largely on football as his high school career has unfolded towards the end. Very talented passer. I think he's over 9,000 career yards in high school passing. He's around 2,500, I think, rushing yards for his career. So very good athlete. That shows on film. Junior film pops a little bit more from the passing department. Senior film pops a little bit more from the athletic department. Plenty of good things I like about him, but I don't want to get too far ahead.
So I'm pulling up some of his stats. Clay had looked up some stuff too and watched, I think, junior and senior film as well. his numbers have dropped off a ton.
Yeah, especially
is he hurt?
passing. I don't know. I don't know the reason for that. I haven't asked him. And I haven't asked his coach. But I mean, his best year is actually 22. He passed for over 3,000 that year and had 29 passing touchdowns. He also had 29 passing touchdowns last year, but far less passing yards. He had 692 rushing yards in 22 and 715 in 23, rushed for 19 touchdowns each of those seasons. So it gives you a pretty good glimpse of 2 years of relatively similar numbers minus the passing yard change. For 22 and 23 this year has taken a slight dip. I don't know the explanation specifically for that. His senior film is there, and yeah, I watched it again this morning just to refamiliarize myself with it. It only went up a couple days ago, and I took a glimpse when it first went up. It's good. He throws with decent anticipation, has a strong arm, definitely has a baseball type of arm when you watch him throw. The athleticism is what kind of stands out about him, in my opinion.
John Reese Plumlee would be the comp. You guys like that?
I think John was quicker, a little bit more of a scat back type of quarterback. I think Carter's a little bit more of a passing quarterback than John ever was.
We'll see. The mechanics do seem like they need a little bit of work. Not that I'm some mechanical expert, but you watch the footwork and you watch the accuracy of the football, and it needs to get better. But that's what you're taking if you're Florida State, right? Is you know that's going to be a bit of a project, and ultimately it's not someone that you're planning to probably play early on in their career. But I will say this, like in the Apple for if you're looking at apples to apples in a trade off with Tramel Jones for Carter Smith, like I do like. I think Tramel Jones is a nice player, but the lack of size, the lack of elite athletic tools, would point to lower upside. Doesn't mean he can't end up being a really nice quarterback, but the amount of 6-foot quarterbacks that have been successful without having elite athleticism attached to them, it's a finite number.
Tramel is a more groomed passer.
Absolutely, he is far and away a more advanced passer, but I still don't know what his upside is, and I guess of the two, I would rather bank on upside. Now that being said, there's a lot of things that have to happen in this football program for this conversation to even matter for Carter, because he's not someone who's going to be playing for probably a couple of years, ideally. And so for it to matter, you need this coaching staff to. I guess we could see. Never mind.
Have we learned no lessons from the last few months?
As raw as we thought Luke Kromenhoek was as a passer, this is exponentially less refined. So, yeah. But let's bring it to a conversation with FSU's current quarterback room, because I think that's eventually like where the dialogue is going to go in the offseason, as you have right now 2 scholarship quarterbacks who you're planning to bring back in Luke Kromenhoek and Brock Glenn. And through the back half of the season, we want to see them play. The team has regressed in general. Supporting cast around them has not gotten any better, has failed them in many ways. And both of those guys have had issues, right? They've had issues. And it's hard to say. Is it on supporting cast? Is it on them? You do worry about someone like Luke Kromenhoek developing bad habits, and you see the eyes wandering down and looking at pressure in the pass rush in front of him now. You saw the 3 turnover sequence from Brock Glenn a few weeks ago against Duke. And so you've seen these moments from both of them that look like regression at times. I say all that because as you try to evaluate moving forward, and you're Mike Norvell and you're making an offensive coordinator hire, you're making an offensive line hire, you're making a wide receiver coach hire. There's a lot of pieces that are you're juggling right now, and you're trying to see what your offense is going to look like next year. You want to retain both of those guys. Buyers and owned, sponsored by
the Turner Group.
You also want to transfer quarterback as well.
I'm buying it.
All right,
so the reason I buy it, to explain myself, is it's not necessarily. I think Luke is capable of being a really good quarterback for Florida State, and I would love to see the full-time investment in Luke and for the leap to happen and for him to become the guy next year, be ahead of schedule, basically. But Mike Norvell, when he comes off of a 2-10 season, whatever this year ultimately ends up being, has to win a lot next year and has to win immediately. And the biggest thing in football is a good quarterback. And the second biggest thing in football is an athletic quarterback who can erase some of your issues that you have on that side of the ball, which we've learned those lessons very well in Tallahassee with what Jordan Travis was capable of doing for a couple years here. So that is why I think you look portal and consider a guy. Now, there's a whole lot of dynamics to that, and I think it complicates life a lot. And I'm not convinced that both of those guys who are currently on the roster would hang around if you're going to get another portal guy, because at some point the messaging is that, well, you keep waiting, but it's never your turn.
Mm-hmm. And there becomes this narrative long term, and I don't think you can be picky to wait to get there. It's like that can Mike Norvell develop a high school quarterback? And
yeah. I was just saying it's a pretty fair. I don't even think it's really a negative recruiting tool. It's
well, yeah, it is a negative recruit, but
it's not a far fetched negative recruiting tool. It's very much based in fact and reality. Like they have not developed and really had any high school quarterback excel under this regime in the 5 years. Obviously. That you can argue about Jay Trav and that development, but I mean, they didn't evaluate him out of high school. He was on the roster when they got here. So, yeah, it's the whole process, and that's why. So, what was the phrasing of the question? Are they going to take a transfer quarterback?
It was, do you take a transfer quarterback? So this is your opinion, I think, is partially involved in this.
I viewed it as should they.
So here's my argument.
Maybe that's what I said.
I think that if they do take a transfer quarterback, you don't go and pay top dollar for some one of the best arms in the country. I think if you're going to take one, it's because you're taking one from a number standpoint. You need another guy in that room, and maybe you want to phrase it in a way like, "Hey, we're taking this guy to go compete with Luke Krummenhoek and Brock Glenn for the starting job." If that's what the quarterback room looks like heading into next season. I just don't think that you can afford to pay a top quarterback in the portal what that's going to cost, which is, well over, I mean, high 6 figures into 7 figures for legitimate, starter quality options at Florida State. When you consider how much help this roster needs at a ton of other premium positions. I mean, look at the defensive line, man. Like they're going to need massive help on the D line if they want to be a competent defensive unit next season because of what we think they're going to lose this offseason and the lack of what they've recruited and developed behind those options. And the same goes for the offensive line. How about a top receiver? There's a ton of spots on this roster where they're going to need to invest a ton of money to fix those areas heading into 2025. And I think that eventually you're going to need to roll with one of these young quarterbacks. And I understand how important next season is for Norvell's tenure and whether he's going to remain FSU's head coach moving forward. But I just don't think that, from a pure financial standpoint, you can afford to pay a top quarterback in the portal to come in and be your starter next year, considering all the other issues on this roster.
Can I add one more dynamic to this discussion? New OC takes a guy who instantly can do what he wants his system to be.
Let's talk about that real quick because that is going to be something to monitor. Like that's going to be part of the conversation, I think, is regardless of who's brought in at offensive coordinator, they're going to be involved in who your quarterback is, whether that's them looking at film and be like, yeah, I could work on Brock or Luke mechanically or schematically, or saying, hey, I want to bring my guy with me. Hell, that might be something that Mike Norvell finds valuable and enticing. That might be a tiebreaker in all this. So real quick, I do have a list of I guess trending hot young offensive coordinator names. Sorry, kid show. They don't necessarily have to be young either, but
would they be sexy hires?
You know what? Some of these might be sexy hires. I'm not going to lie. Some of them might be sexy hires. But guys who are also connected to underclass, or I shouldn't say underclass quarterbacks, non-senior quarterbacks that have eligibility. Different levels here, right? But let's go down a list real quick. So I wrote this down. I might put it up on the board or make a story out of it too, because I just find it to be an interesting dynamic. So number one, Cade Bell, offensive coordinator at Pittsburgh. We've talked about him before, ties to the region, has put up some really prolific offenses at the FCS level and has turned around the Pitt offense in short time. He has Eli Holstein, who is ranked as a top 50 quarterback right now when it comes to passer rating. 17 passing touchdowns to 6 interceptions. He's a redshirt freshman, I believe, Alabama transfer. But so someone with upside, someone who's been efficient. Every name I'm going to put out there, like it's going to be varying levels of efficiency, but all of us would take 17 touchdowns to 6 interceptions right now, wouldn't we? Next up, Buster Faulkner from Georgia Tech, another guy that we mentioned. Haynes Keene is a redshirt junior, technically. I don't know how that's possible. Feels like he's been playing college football for a really long time, but that would give you an identity on offense. A name who is certainly going to make waves this offseason in coaching community, whether it's going to be as an offensive coordinator, whether it's someone taking a shot at him as maybe even a head coach. But that's Ben Arbuckle over at Washington State. I think he's 29 years old. He was at Western Kentucky previously, and he's produced really good offenses wherever he's been. John Mateer is a Texas kid who's I think a redshirt sophomore, but he's a dual threat quarterback. He has 600 rushing yards. How many passing yards does he have right now? He's a top 20 quarterback in passing efficiency. He's got 2,300 passing yards, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Washington State plays more of I guess it's closer to like a G5 schedule now, since the Pac-12 RIP has been reduced to just the Pac-2. But I digress. Joe Craddock, Chris Nee, happy, smiling. He's on the list here. A younger coordinator, regional ties, but his quarterback is Darren Mensah. He's a freshman, I think a true freshman. And he's a top 10 quarterback in passer rating, 16 passing touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 2,000 passing yards, less of a dual threat guy, and has a really good like supporting cast around him, and not a great conference, but a name that's certainly worth mentioning. Last up I have here is Jake Spavato over at Baylor. He has Sawyer Robertson, who he's kind of turned into a reclamation project, and he is a top 30 quarterback in terms of passer rating. He has 17 passing touchdowns to 4 interceptions. I think he can move around a little bit. He's got like 300 rushing yards. So there are names of qualified or qualified-ish coordinators that have ties to quarterbacks. I find that to be an interesting talking point. You okay, Zach?
Yeah, just
Zach is standing on the table for something. Not sure what it is, but he's standing on the table.
What made the table move just then? How excited did you get?
I just got so excited about the potential of bringing an OC with his amazing quarterback.
What sexy name did that?
I definitely think that that's an interesting wrinkle to this, because what does that look like from a financial standpoint? Are you able to get someone kind of on a discount if you're able to bring them in and alongside their OC and just kind of say that you're going to be able to run a similar offense at kind of a higher level school?
Discount might be like relative to if they were just a straight up free agent, right? Like I'm sure you're gonna have to pay for a starting quarterback no matter what. But what you might avoid like the Cam Ward negotiating window where it just kept getting stretched out and using multiple schools against each other and stuff like that, right? It would just be.
I'm gonna bring up an old name, John Wolford, who I don't think is still in the NFL, but hung around for a while as a
Wake
scout
Forest quarterback.
Yeah, so he went to Wake, I believe, if I recall correctly from his recruiting. He's a Jacksonville kid, went to Bishop Kenny. I believe either the OC or it might have been Clausen. I think it was actually Clausen, because Clausen ended up there and he loved that offense. So that's like when that all happened, that switched him around as far as a recruit. And he went there and was pretty prolific in that system. Sort of the same concept. Sorry, just an example that popped in my head here.
So you guys are on different ends of the spectrum. And I think both, like, this shows, I think, how
I'll be up front on the money part that Zach brought up. He's 100% right about that. I rarely tell Zach he's 100% right, but in this case, I'm going to do it.
Don't need the ego.
But like, I just don't care about the money. Like, they're going to have to spend outrageously. Like, they're just going to have to. Everybody in the country is about to spend a hell of a lot till the health settlement comes down, because they're all telling people they're getting money that in the end they're probably not really going to get, but they're going to get it for like 7 to 9 months before basically July of next year. So like that's just going to be the thing. Like, you got to do it. Your roster's not very good. You're probably going to have a decent amount of attrition. I think they're going to have a healthy amount of attrition. You're going to have to spend to restock the roster, and because you are having to buy premium positions, it's going to be expensive. So like, buckle up. Here we go.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a great mindset to it if you're a school that just has endless amounts of money. Florida State's not one of those. Like, they have a finite amount that they're going to be able to spend. So, yeah, I mean, I would be on the same wavelength if we were at if we're covering Oregon or covering, one of these other schools that seems to just never run out of money. But I mean, FSU's, there's a reason why, they're not just spending top dollar on every single player that, is available. Like they have to be smart with their money. And I think that's why my argument is more so, directed towards them spending it on those, lines of scrimmage positions, because I think that's where FSU needs the most help.
I just think balling on a budget after you just spent $7 million to fire some coaches, and you're probably going to spend a few more million to fire some more, and then spend many other millions to hire some other. Like, screw it. Like, if you are truly trying to fix it quickly, spend, baby. It ain't my money.
So it's a lot less than the alternative, which is us all failing and having to buy out Mike Norvell and pay him $50 million over, or $60 million, or I guess at this point with the coordinator reshuffling, you're at least saying 2025 you got Mike, and maybe even into 2026. But you're not letting him make these extra expenditures, right? If he was just a dead man walking, but still you're talking about in the neighborhood of $50 million. So can they just stop Bayer Sonone, sponsored by
the Turner Group,
just halting the renovation project, just being like, screw it?
I'm going to Sonone that, because that's less of a reality than my view of just screw the budget, just spend.
Yeah, but you're spending it all on getting a great, like, elite roster, and then get butts back in the seat, and then you go back to the well and you put and I'm not saying you stop the home side, right? Yeah, that's it. You stop doing the away side, or you don't even start it. You just do the home side. You finish that. You make that look good. Screw the other side. No one cares. It can look however you want it to look on TV. I don't care. No.
I mean, if you're telling us that we could go spend $80 or $100 million on the roster, I mean, that would be fun.
Yeah,
that would fit Chris's MO for this offseason.
DJ Uungale gets $5 million of it. No, probably not. So, in all seriousness, back to things based in reality. The idea of taking a transfer quarterback, I think both of your points have legitimacy to it. Like, I don't think this is like last year we were talking about you probably need a transfer quarterback, and people were pushing back on that. You needed a transfer quarterback. Did you nail the transfer quarterback? It could be debated. I don't want to call it just yet. The season, there's still 3 more games left. But this, I think there's merit to both of it, and it is complex. And I think the conversation that we're having has to be this ping-ponging back and forth and pros and cons that Mike Norvell is constantly weighing. And even like in the middle ground of this, let's say you go and you get a transfer quarterback who is good, and it's not just a depth piece like Zach is mentioning it, and it's not someone who you're paying top dollar for, like Chris is saying. Somewhere in between. Like, this is so delicate at what you're balancing. There's a legitimate chance that you could end up losing both Luke and Brock. Like, that does exist. That's better than 0% chance that happens. And so you have to tread very carefully. Now, I don't think FSU is confident that they're going to be able to retain both of them, but I don't know, guys. Like, I don't know that there's a guarantee that they're going to retain both of them, even if they don't take a transfer quarterback, right? So it's going to be a very interesting next month or so in seeing how you navigate all of this. But I do think the offensive coordinator hire is going to play a huge role in that. That's going to matter quite a bit. I was trying to think if there's anything else quarterback-wise that we want to talk about. I know Thomas Castellanos' name has been thrown around. I think that's premature. Right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think when it comes to, if you're talking about specific names, if that comes up in the next few weeks for possible portal targets for Florida State, just think that they haven't hired their OC yet. So the OC is going to have a huge say in what FSU does at that position, because they're probably going to, if they do explore the transfer ranks, they're probably going to want someone that fits their system. So, let's wait a few weeks until we start finding out who the portal targets are going to be.
Okay. Let's talk about, there was a town hall meeting last night. And for FSU boosters, and it was with FSU athletic director Michael Alford. Oh boy, this is just where, when it falls off the cliff for me, it falls off the freaking cliff.
All right, I'm going to talk because Brendan's forgot how to. It was with FSU University Vice President and AD Michael Alford, as well as Seminole Boosters President and CEO Stephen Ponder. The duo spoke for roughly 50 to 60 minutes with collected boosters that were on the call. I thought it was a very good direct-to-consumer event, basically. They covered a number of topics. They talked about the building of the football-only facility as well as the stadium renovations. They talked about NIL. They talked about the house settlement and what's coming with that. 2024 and the disappointment of the football season, the coaching changes, and the potential hires were addressed. They very much covered a variety of subjects. There was an ability for boosters to submit questions beforehand, I think up to 2 each. They read a few of those, answered them directly. I thought all in all it was very good. A lot of it for me was rehashed because it's things that I've heard either in like a board of trustees meeting or just in conversations with Michael Alford or just in general, like paying attention to what Boosters is doing in the communication they put out to their users. Obviously, the thing that probably got the most newsworthy coverage was 2024 comments. And I thought in general it came off as Alford endorsing Mike Norvell in a belief that he can turn this around. He said there's been overwhelming, was the word used, interest in the openings, and many of those names would be familiar. Of course, none of which were shared. That's not the setting that's going to happen in. He said that Michael Alford and Mike Norvell talk on a regular, on almost a daily basis. Every Sunday they meet and kind of speak about the week ahead, speak about what just happened, speak about long-term projection, trying to figure things out. That played a role in the timing of the dismissals of the 3 coaches.
I was going to say, do we think they talked this past Sunday?
Yeah. I think they talk every Sunday after a game, whether in person or over the phone, depending on, each of their schedules and what they're doing. There was a lot of, what you would expect in that setting where it's essentially you asking for people's money and also explaining why their money is important to you. There was a lot of sort of conveying positive thoughts about the future. So anything in particular, Zach was in for most of it. He took a phone call about 30 minutes in. I think he missed some of the 2024 stuff, but he was in for most of the earlier stuff. They talked about boosters. Oh, you were? I didn't think you were.
I was being extra douche. I was listening to vinyl, doing yoga, and my wife was listening to it on the couch with the dog chilling next to her. And so she was listening to it. So I was overhearing things. And I could hear comments between having the headphones on of what was it? She was like, why am I listening to this? They're not saying anything. So that's basically the feedback that I was getting secondhand.
They talked about boosters makes up roughly a similar amount of the budget annually for them as the media rights, which is about 35% each. On the facilities, both the stadium and the football only facility, it's about extending the footprint of football. FSU's footprint for football related facilities was among the lower half of the league. They'll now be around second, only to, I believe it's Clemson, that they'll trail at that point. That's largely the football only facility. With the stadium, Michael Alford specifically said the goal is obviously for that to be a more year-round event hosting complex, in addition to providing fancy amenities that they want for the 6 to 7 home games per year.
A little motocross, maybe?
Yeah, motocross was mentioned. Ponder mentioned that, on the cost of seating, obviously a big thing. I'm losing my seats of 30 years, those kind of comments, that there are 12 price points and the ability to get in there at the same price point you were at 23 is there. It just necessarily isn't the same seats. That's obviously interesting. They have done a lot of one-on-one, very personal, lengthy phone calls, meetings with people regarding the ticket availability situation. And obviously we've seen plenty of that on the message board. I know plenty of people that have dealt with that, just hearing about that. You okay, Brendan? We had Zach jumping on a table and Brendan breaking a table. It's really been a day. Naming rights were brought up. Pub Sub Stadium still in play. He did mention that for that to happen, it basically has to be done in a tasteful manner. Like when they're discussing it, it has to be something that's tasteful. Brand value, viewership, those things were mentioned. Hey, baby, I love me a Pub Sub. No Pub Sub hating here.
Chattanooga Whiskey Field. Sponsored
NIL
by
landscape and house settlement were both discussed. Ponder made it clear FSU is very competitive in NIL with the house settlement, what's coming there. We've talked some about this on here. Basically creating a cap, 20.5 million specifically was mentioned last evening, distributing that to players. It will actually help fund more scholarships for more sports. What? Go ahead, Brendan.
That that to me, listening to that part of it felt a little pie in the sky-ish, and saying that it would be salary cap for all of football and that would be a good thing. I find it hard to believe, and it feels a little naive that if you're thinking that basically two parts of this, but basically one that SEC schools are going to like, yeah, we're good at 15 million, that we've chosen to allocate to football, or if they go the full 25 or whatever, like they're going to find through their NIL. And this was the other thing they talked about, was having NIL have some clearinghouse to where you get an agreement with some national brand or regional brand, and the clearinghouse says, yeah, this is worth this much amount of money. That's fair. And that would avoid the loophole of like a booster, paying you, through NIL, like a certain amount of money that's more than what that deal would normally be. The first time that deal gets denied, and that's what schools are going to try to do to find a loophole to pay more money than what the quote unquote salary cap is going to be. I'm almost like certain of that, and talking to people like outside of FSU's NIL landscape, like other people who cover NIL nationally. Like there's going to be schools and the big two conferences are going to go above that. And through using NIL. FSU's talking about it just being a marketing deal, and they're thinking this clearinghouse is going to be something that kind of keeps everything in check. But I don't, until you have something nationally through government, right? Until, what's the word I'm looking for?
Regulation.
Antitrust. Until you have antitrust exemption for the NCAA, it's going to be extremely hard to enforce NIL deals, because the first time that this clearinghouse goes and says, you actually, this agreement that you've come to with this company isn't actually worth this much. It's actually worth 30% lower. You have it for this. There's going to be a lawsuit again, and another one that's going to be against the NCAA. So maybe that ends up coming down the pipe with the new regime in our country, but right now that felt very pie in the sky to me. And I think FSU, if they are operating on the belief that people are going to operate under or within a salary cap structure across the board, you're entering it in a competitive disadvantage for football, which is alarming to me.
Yeah. They said the belief is that the cap will be heavily enforceable. I'm very interested to see that dynamic of it all.
Yeah.
On the battle's end, they would become more of almost a marketing agency. And he used the example of Patrick Payton with Powerade facilitating that deal, which then goes to the clearinghouse that Brendan referenced, waiting for approval. I'm with Brendan. Like all things in college athletics, I feel like get thrown into the mix without everything being thought out. And they have made a great deal of effort to truly think out the house settlement and the ability to basically launch it and do it in an effective manner. So I'm hoping maybe it will be better than some of the more recent experiences of things. But still, that being said, things always get tested in their infancy. And that's what Brendan's talking about with the lawsuit. And I certainly have thought about that too. On the structuring of contracts with the student athletes, multi-year agreements, basically, FSU has worked with going to some teams and personnel people. Alfred specifically mentioned going to the Cowboys here. We believe that. Go ahead, Brendan.
Dallas Cowboys.
Well, there's a familiarity there because of Alfred's time working with them. I think they've also gone to Rich McKay. He's with the Bucks.
He was. I think
Falcons.
Falcons now. I think it's the Falcons.
Yeah, I think there's been 2 to 3 instances, but the one that Alfred specifically mentioned on last evening's booster call was going to the Cowboys. We believe that Bruce Warwick and Derek Ray, to some degree, have been involved in those too, and that's largely to figure out how to manage the salary cap and put it together and do those things, because that's good. Where we're moving to.
Like I do think that's good that they are legitimately good at knowing that salary has to be very well structured, and you have to have a better idea of market value than you had this past cycle. That's important. I do, in all seriousness, the Dallas Cowboy salary cap is a bit tongue in cheek there. It's good that you're going to pro organizations to see how that's managed. Zach is working on something about that now, about the NFLification of your front office, because that is something where I think can find value in the margins compared to how many other programs are run, especially if there's going to be somewhat of they're saying a hard cap structure. I think it's going to be more of a loose cap, but we'll see what that ends up looking like. My concern is until we see or hear more details about it. Like, it's great that you have people in your current front office going to learn about that and get more details. There are people in the NFL who spend years and years and go to college for business school and whatnot that uh, are learning how to manage this type of stuff and have learned about it through being proteges with other cap experts. And so I guess I wonder again if you're going into this naively with sending people for a couple days to learn, quick learn it all, versus hiring someone who has or hiring an outside firm or something who has a full experience of being able to manage cap and understanding the market.
I think, I think as you move into revenue sharing with this house settlement, I think in hand, you should start structuring your organization to reflect what's going to be needed. And yes, it is a step to have those already in the organization get informed on what's going to be needed to manage the salary cap and how to construct these new age contracts with college football players. But I think to Brennan's point, and what I wrote on the site in a more in-depth manner is you need to, I think it'd be smart to hire those already with that expertise, because you're investing less time and money into trying to train your current staff to do that. Whereas I think you can already find integral roles for those already on your staff in the recruiting and scouting departments, whereas you can bring in some additional individuals with expertise when it comes to managing the salary caps, negotiating contracts with players. I know there are plenty of either current or former NFL personnel, people in that industry that would be willing to take jobs in the college ranks as that this model continues to shift more towards the professional model. So yeah, I mean that's what I would be a proponent for, and that's kind of what I wrote about in that article, in that Road to the Rebuild series I'm doing. Is I want to see more of the NFLification of FSU's front office staff and their off-field support staff in general.
Because what Michael Offord is talking about, real quick on that, is he mentioned this. I think it's a very good point. Is like the evaluation is going to matter more than ever. And even if I can be looking at it with a jaundiced eye of like, I think teams will go over the salary cap, you're still talking about like what's probably going to be a baseline of operating budget for most power teams, and then still like probably some level of a cap to where you're not talking about teams operating at 100% more, doubling budgets or whatever of what other people are doing. And so that is the playing field very well could be even. And we've seen that even in this NIL era that there is this ability, we're living it, for very swift change year to year, to where evaluation is going to be paramount to what you're doing and how you're building your program and sustaining it, especially having, it's different than the NFL to where the talent pool that you're scouting is far more vast, right? You have high school, which is huge entity, and then you have college. Like the NFL is scouting NFL teams and free agents, and then they're scouting college players. Well, you're scouting high school, which is more vast, and you're scouting NFL for transfer portal, or sorry, college football for transfer portal options, and you're doing it with fewer staff members in your front office, and the inequity of like coaches have far more input in the process in college than they do in the NFL, but they also have significantly less time to evaluate than what the evaluators in the NFL have. And so it's a very flawed system right now for where it's going. I do agree that evaluation is going to be huge of what you do going forward. And then I wait anxiously to see how FSU responds to that. And I hope, as someone who enjoys covering this program and enjoys watching it and have many people, friends and family who are very invested in this program, that they go ahead and enhance the level of front office allocation resources that they're putting into it. That feels paramount to where you're going. It feels essential. Sorry, Chris, go ahead. I'm off the soapbox.
You're all good. A couple dates set on the House settlement. April 7th of 2025 is the final approval hearing. July 1st of 2025, which is new academic year, following the approval of the settlement, that will begin revenue sharing. So there's 7 or so dates between something that's already passed in October of this year to July 1st. They're on the side if you want to see them, but those two are the most key to know with regards to that. One thing Alfred added in the end, and Ponder reinforced it, was that they believe the improvement of the facilities, they believe facilities and what you were talking about there, which is recruiting, development, scouting, and the salary cap factor, will create a playing field that FSU is prepared to be very good in. We shall see. And obviously they brought up, you need to be good in football and you need to be good in basketball because the ACC success initiatives, because the lawsuit was also discussed a good bit. Nothing too earth-shattering. We've covered way too much of the lawsuit for my liking, but he did bring up that currently the one thing agreed upon in the ACC is the success initiatives and the possibility of getting more revenue that way. So he was talking about being set up to have success in those things, therefore, trigger the initiative and get the returns on it.
All right. Last thing I got here. Well, it's a question for Zach. So set the stage. This is Thursday as we're recording this. We're not at practice this week. Chris and I, as well as our ragtag group of interns, will be at practice starting next week on Tuesday. And it'll be our first time being able to, with our own eyes, look at FSU practicing with new defensive coordinator, interim defensive coordinator Randy Shannon. Some of the changes at the position groups. We'll see Rick Stockstill working very hands-on with the wide receivers. And so there will be some changes. I'm curious to get an idea. And like at this point, we're not really gauging games or practices in a very in-depth manner, right? It's more big picture and eye towards the future. But I am curious to see how players are responding, what the energy is like. Zach, you've done a good job getting some sourcing on this in the last day or two. You have some details to share. I'm going to throw this to you real quick and just what you've heard, what stood out to you in some of your reporting.
Yeah, man, I think this team is ready to face Charleston Southern. No, I mean,
I knew just by the voice right away that you're just going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think, hold on, getting a call. Let me.
Oh, how very.
That was probably a spam. But I think, just from what I heard, sounds like the players are really rallying around Randy Shannon as the interim DC. I was told kind of in recent weeks, like when the defensive staffers were kind of addressing the defense on the sideline, like just not a lot of engagement from the entire team, people kind of standing off to the side. And, an onlooker told me that this most recent practice, I believe the first time they practiced since the Notre Dame game was on Tuesday, and the entire defense seemed really attent to what Randy Shannon was asking them to do, was all kind of huddled up together. And, their play in practice was also described as impressive. Offense looked solid as well, from what a source told me. So, yeah, I'm not trying to sell it as this is going to be some, wildly improved unit on both sides of the football. They're not going to, go turn into world beaters. But, I think it is encouraging that guys are responding to the coaching changes in what seems like a positive manner.
Buyer Sonone, sponsored by
the Turner Group.
FSU pitches 2 shutouts in a row, and Randy Shannon is hired as the defensive coordinator.
You know how the first Joker ended?
No, actually, I forget. Poorly.
Yeah.
Was it the Robert De Niro scene?
It's the one where he's like, "You get what you effing deserve." You're talking about that one?
Yeah. I'm just imagining Zach's like, I don't know. Just turn it on and let the film play. Let Zach go.
Well.
I think it's impossible. Not that he gets the DC job, but I mean, are we talking about Randy Shannon getting retained? I don't know.
Retained D. Shannon. All right. For Chris Nee, Zach Blostein, I'm Brendan Sonone. This has been On the Bench. We'll talk to you guys next week.